Hi, and welcome to the Math Together show where thoughtful educators gather and learn together. I am Dr. Sue Looney.
I am Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. We're so glad that you're here to join us today. We are really excited to talk about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. How do we work together to support families and caregivers in education as allies for their students?
So if you're here and you're tuning in, if you want to shoot like, or even if you're not watching it live, please go ahead and do that. Say hello. We're glad you're here. Go ahead and use the comment feature. We've been raffling. We've been using people that are raffling. Their names get entered in to receive a free month's membership in our online membership community, the Math Together community. Last show, our winner was Nicole Williams. So congratulations to Nicole.
Yay!
And we'll announce next week's winner at our next week's show.
And we have two parts that are happening to our show today. We have a guest, Kim Quinn from Quincy, Massachusetts, who's going to be here to talk about how they have supported their students by communicating with their parents and caregivers. And the next part of our show will be about Math Together solutions on how we can aid in helping families with remote learning.
Excellent. So we're so excited to have Kim here with us today. She is coming from Quincy Public Schools, which is a city just south of Boston towards the coast, and serves a large population of students, I think with over 5 different languages that they support within that district. Kim herself has over 25 years of of education service that she has provided to students from parochial schools and public schools. She's taught everything from pre-K to 9, everything within that range. And she's worked since 2000. She became in Quincy, Massachusetts, the 8th grade lead teacher for mathematics, and then ended up as the 5th grade focus teacher. And then in 2016, she became the math curriculum team administrator for K-8. And so we have worked with Kim and know her commitment to students and families. And we're really excited that she's here with us today.
Hi, ladies. That was a great intro. Thank you.
You are welcome. We are so thrilled that you're here. Kim is the real deal. Kim, when we talk about being in service of students, that is Kim's motto. So thank you so much for taking the time today. And you've really risen to some challenging circumstances in the world that we're living in. And so people are really going to benefit from hearing your experience. But I get to kick off with the question that we've been asking all of our guests. So as we get to know one another in this space and our audience gets to know you, we'd like to know your why, Kim. Mm-hmm. So why do you do what you do? Why education? Why specifically mathematics, and sort of all your journey that led you to where you are today?
Oh, I love this question, because honestly, some days I wonder, like, how on earth did I get where I am today? And then other times it makes so much sense. So I'd have to say that, I'm one of those annoying people that always knew I wanted to be in education. I always wanted to be a teacher. And, that part of that stems from the fact that my mom was a high school teacher in Quincy, and as well as a professor at Northeastern. So not only that teaching, experience and seeing what she did every day, but also that strong math background. Honestly, I think in our household, math was more important than even reading. She would probably disagree if you asked her, but truly, like, math was where it was at. And, we just grew up with all things math, and we were a large extended family, and we played cards. And, by 8 years old, I, was learning how to play cribbage and make 15s and get to 31 because they might need an extra person and you needed to slide into that seat. So I was always strong in math. But I have to say, I really resisted being a math teacher. I wanted nothing to do with being a math teacher. I was going to teach little kids. I wanted kindergarten, first grade. I obviously knew I'd be teaching math within that. But that stigma that we're still up against, with people kind of looking at you when they find out you're a math teacher and kind of look like, oh, like, you're like, nobody died. Like, I just teach math instead of another subject. Really kept me away from it. So when I started out, when I finally got my first classroom, I worked in a parochial school. Now I was a preschool teacher, and I absolutely loved it. But I was newly married and was making, $18,000 a year, and we wanted to buy a house. And I knew like I couldn't stay there forever as much as I wanted to. The community, everything, I loved it. And I started, putting my application out. And this was in the 90s where there were very few jobs and I was getting very few interviews. And the few times I did, they kind of looked at me and said, well, we know you could do preschool, but could you teach a first grader to read? I didn't have that experience. So I was a little discouraged, but happy with where I was. And I walked into my parochial school to get ready in August. And my principal was just so upset because the math teacher had quit. And it was 3 weeks now, and she didn't have one resume that had come in for this position. And she kiddingly looked at me and said, but I have over a dozen for your position. And I just looked at her, and it was like that light bulb went on. And I said, I could teach math. And I talked about how I had thought about doing a math, dual major with math. And I had taken, up to Calc 3. And, I would have to review Algebra 1. But I was pretty sure I could do it, but I'm not certified. Again, it was a parochial school, and it was the 90s. She was like, not a big deal. So I literally walked in that day as a preschool teacher, walked out as the math teacher that day, where I was, what I ultimately did was taught 5th, 6th, 7th grade math, 8th grade algebra, and 2 religion classes every day. So I had to prep for 6 classes. And I loved every minute of it. Like, that was when I just loved it. I loved every group of kids that was in front of me. I loved teaching the algebra. I loved seeing the progression from 5th grade all the way up to 8th grade, and knowing, at the time, thinking I was going to see these kids through. And then that experience led me to have that experience to get eventually hired in Quincy, where I was the 8th grade math focused teacher, and then had the experience of going to the high school, and then ultimately when a position opened up in elementary, which was my love, ending up in 5th grade. Yep. And if you had asked me 10 years ago if I would be any place other than the classroom, I would have told you were crazy. Right. But I had one of those moments again where this new position came up. We hadn't had this position in Quincy before. And I read what, the synopsis of it and what it was requiring. And it really touched on the other things about education I loved, which was sharing ideas and learning from other teachers and being able to co-teach and go in and demo lessons for people and all of that. And it truly was the only job that would have gotten me out of the classroom. And so I was very fortunate, and luckily, because I've had so much experience with preschool all the way up to 9th grade, could go into the interview and say, I feel pretty confident that I could do this. So it's been a crazy journey, but it's I love it. I'm excited to be in the position I'm in now. Yeah.
And what's been interesting, thank you for that story, Kim. I feel like everyone we talk to starts with, I really wasn't going to do this, so let me just explain why. So true. We're gonna move forward into our questions so that we can really learn from your experience in this moment. But from preschool teacher to, to where you are now, leading the district at the K-7 level in math education, K-8. So I think we're going to jump into your experiences around caregivers.
Yeah. So Kim, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how things went in Quincy when the pandemic stopped everything and school became remote, and how that helped you all kind of form your summer program, and how did you communicate with the parents and caregivers of Quincy for your summer program?
Okay. It certainly has evolved. I mean, when I think back to when we left in March and what it is today, it's just been a huge growth, a huge experience for us. I mean, when we left, we thought we were going to be out for 2 weeks. Every teacher thought that they would be back in 2 weeks. So in terms of communicating with the parents, we really left a lot of that up to the superintendent and then the principals in terms of what was happening week to week, day to day, as just things started to unfold. And in the beginning, it was 2 weeks of the curriculum team really sending out packets, doing things online that the kids could do at home. And then as we realized that this wasn't, ending anytime soon, more went on the teachers. So then the teachers were reaching out to their individual students, to their individual parents to let them know how things were changing. And you know, everything was so new to everybody. We were all trying to learn how to do everything. I mean, we had kindergarten and first grade teachers that, you know, knew nothing about Google Classroom prior to all this, and we're going online and watching videos and figuring it all out, and then figuring out how to teach their kids and their kids' parents. So like the growth has been amazing, and the teachers, you know, and everyone in the district has really, you know, came forward and just did whatever needed to be done. So when we finished out the school year and we knew we wanted to do a summer program, we knew we needed to do it differently. We knew that it needed to be synchronous. We knew that we needed that face-to-face time. We couldn't just keep pushing out stuff, which again, we had dabbled by the end of all of this, the end of the school year, and Google Meets and all that, but nothing was really firm in terms of what that looks like. So as we headed into the summer, we knew we needed to service our special ed students. So those were absolutely right away. Those were all those students in sub-separate and everything we reached out to. And we let them know that there was going to be a program for them. And in the beginning, it was supposed to be remote, like that, because that's what everyone was doing. There was no even inkling when we were first planning this that we could do an in-person situation. And then things changed and we pivoted, and then it was getting a school ready so that we could service, you know, preschool to grade 12 of these sub-separate kids in face-to-face learning. And then when we started to think about our other programs that we would have face-to-face that we knew we couldn't do that and we had to do it remotely, we would always invite the students. It wasn't opened up to everybody. It was an invitation of those kids that were struggling. And we realized that this year, everybody was kind of at a loss. Nobody had what they needed to have. So we ended up opening it up to everybody. So anyone that wanted to be part of our programs, normally in elementary school, we'd have more of a reading program over this summer. We changed that so that they were getting reading, math, and science, as well as social emotional, as well as PE and art and all of that. And we really just tried to give the kids as much as we could, and anyone that wanted to be there could. And thankfully we had enough teachers that would join us so that we could have decent sized classes as well as that. And that's when it really changed with the communication piece, because now you had teachers reaching out to their students and to the parents and really knowing what that was all about, because we did so much training prior to it, what it was going to look like, you know, information on how to do that. Information in terms of if somebody all of a sudden, you know, dropped out of class for a couple of days, reaching out and saying like, are they sick? Is it your Wi-Fi? Do you need another device? All of those kind of things. And just trying our best to get as many kids involved, knowing that that would help us carry over into September, wherever that would be. And the more connections we could make, that would help.
Kim, what you addressed in such a beautiful way was issues of equity. So what you talked about was reaching out to everybody, and when people didn't participate, that you teachers communicated to pull them in. And I know we're talking about summer, but you knew this was going to inform and help going into the school year. So it's a really nice example of using your equity lens of inclusivity for everybody, which benefits everybody. I mean, it's just so important. You know, we're not leaving anybody out of that equation. So what are the lessons from this summer then that other than what we're talking about right here, that take you into this school year?
In terms of like with parents?
Yes, and communicating with caregivers and families. And
I don't think it's any different than before. Letting them know that they can reach out to you, letting them know that you're available. And I think it's more important now, but it's not anything we haven't done in Quincy. You know, we've always had that. I have to say, I pride myself on saying I'm part of, you know, Quincy Public Schools, because we've always had that strong community. So it's not anything different, but I think it's being more aware of how much more important it is, because as much as we've got all this information coming in, we're still feeling very isolated, and the parents are feeling very isolated and not quite knowing what's going on, and maybe not feeling like they know the technology piece or anything like that. So we're doing trainings for parents and you know, all of that. So anything we can do, and that comes from the teachers and the administration being so open to say, hey, you know, if you're having an issue, reach out to us. And then we might realize something that we didn't realize before. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have to make sure that they know this, or we need to do this to help them out so that this will go better. So it's really just constantly pivoting and getting feedback from the parents or getting feedback from the teachers with their frustration and how we can help that so that there's a better communication.
Yeah, so it's that flexibility and that open line of communication. You said several times, like it's constant, we're consistent, we always have, but you also mentioned being isolated. So it's just elevating the importance of that we keep that line of communication going. Can you talk about an example of a training that happened for teachers? For families and caregivers?
Well, those trainings are actually coming up in terms of, I don't know if any of them have actually happened yet, but just in terms of knowing the technology, Google Classroom, all of those kind of things. We sent out a survey to ask the parents what they needed, what they felt like they needed to be successful, given the fact that, all these possibilities of what September has brought, may bring to us. So, with that, we have some trainings coming up. So as far as I know, I don't think we've had any of the trainings yet, but they will be, kind of all things, Google Classroom and synchronous learning and, Chrome, using a Chromebook and sometimes just like emails and how to set up email accounts and make sure you're checking your emails and all of that. So basically whatever's been, highlighted as a need for the students.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's really amazing. I haven't heard of another district that is providing trainings for parents like that, and I'm sure there are many districts out there who have started doing this, but that's really excellent.
Well, and in particular, when we know what we know about the city of Quincy, the size of the student body and the number of languages that are being spoken, and so the outreach is significant. We're talking, I don't know if you know how many students, if you had to put a number on that, but how many do graduate a year, do you think? Is it like 600 kids?
Oh goodness, I would say at least between the two high schools, yeah.
2 high schools, right?
Two high schools, 5 middle schools, and how many elementary?
11 schools.
Yeah. Yep.
And an early childhood center.
There's that too. Can never leave that out. Go ahead, Heidi.
Oh no, I think the thing that one of the reasons that I had loved being there years ago was the fact that you could hear so many different languages at the same time in the same place, and all of them were honored, and you could hear kids speaking to each other in different languages and then translating to English and then vice versa. And it was just that idea of providing a resource for students where they could, have that amongst each other and with the larger community. We often think that we're doing well if we're translating into one other language in order to reach out to parents or to community members. And in, a lot of places in the country, it's not just one other language. And so making sure that we're providing those resources to families and communities in the ways that are best supportive of them, I think is really important.
Right. Awesome. Kim, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like my experience in Quincy has taught me so much, and I value being there. So it's really nice to have you here with us today. And everybody should know that Kim is a member of the Math Together community. So she was really gracious in accepting our invitation to come on the show. So we're really pleased to have you here.
Well, I have to say I've learned just as much from all of you, because I've worked with all of you very closely at one time or another over the years and been very fortunate for that. And, it's made me a better teacher. That's, we talk about that math together, and that's what it's all about. You can't do it alone.
No.
Yeah, she still calls herself a teacher, even though she's an administrator. I love it. I love it.
All right, Kim, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to stay on and do part 2 of the show. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim. Hey, before we move on, I wanted to say hi to Garrett, because Garrett's back. He's from Indiana. Hi, Garrett.
Hi, Garrett.
Hello. So as we transition to the second part of our show, we are going to highlight a couple of things. This whole show today is about how we can reach out to parents and caregivers as allies. Now, more than ever, we are in it together, whether we like it or not, and we are reliant on each other. So we want to get into some tips and a lifeline from the Math Together community that we're going to highlight as we go forward into this next session. So Molly is going to talk about first the Math Together at Home community.
Right. So we have a new branch to Math Together, and we're calling it Math Together at Home. And through conversations that we've been having either online or in our personal lives with parents and teachers, we've discovered that there's a need right now for parents to get support at home, or caregivers to get support at home. More people than ever are choosing to homeschool or are choosing to do pods, or what are the other things that they're calling these things? I don't know. There's lots of terms out there, but people are going to be supporting kids in ways that they've never had to support their students. So we wanted to be a lifeline for those people, and in hopes that we could support, we could provide resources, and a place where caregivers can ask questions. Math doesn't look like it used to when most people with children were in school, and we recognize that and we understand that, and that is the job that we do all the time. So we've put together a place for parents to get that support, and we're calling it Math Together at Home.
And I think another part of the why was to help educators too, so that it could be one place to send families and caregivers that are wondering and could use support. It's a place for an educator to say, you can go here and ask your questions. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the what is Math Together at Home. So like we've said, Math Together at Home is another branch of the Math Together learning community. And so it's a membership site that people can join and get ongoing support. And so it is a community of caregivers, parents, families, anyone that is working with a child at home to learn mathematics. And what we have 2 times a month, we have support group meetings where you can come to those meetings, and those will be held live and you can ask questions. We're going to provide a roadmap of topics. And so it is a community for K-5. It is elementary educators, and we'll look at what are the topics you might be teaching each month. There's a few other components, Heidi, if you want to jump in too.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think is critical is that we have an environment where we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. So you might have that your kids are in school remote, and maybe you want some additional content for them, or maybe you are looking for I'm not exactly sure what this means. I received this work from my child's teacher, and I'm not sure how to help my child with that. And your teacher, teachers have so many kids that they are supporting. We want to reach out and be that lifeline. So it is that idea of, okay, come and ask your questions, and we will help you unpack what that mathematics is and why your child's teacher is assigning it in that way and or teaching it in that way. So I think there's sometimes a disconnect between the math that happens at school and the kind of math that we used to have when we were growing up ourselves. And sometimes, I think James Tant mentions that what looks familiar, we might consider that to be understanding. So I know how to do this math, so I might just teach my kid that in that way. But it doesn't mean that they're understanding. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting families at home with that. So how do you make connections to everyday mathematics that you might see at home with your child? How do you support in that way? What are ways that we can connect art and mathematics, or music and mathematics, or literature and mathematics, so that we're providing those additional resources to help your students make sense of and have a joyful experience in math. It's really critical to us that math become an exciting and fun experience for students, and it's at times can be a challenge to provide that at home. And so we want to make sure that we are that resource for you as we go forward.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're wanting to learn more about this, if you go to the looneymath.com website, Up at the top, you will see a link where you can click on Math Together at Home, and that will take you to that site where you can see and hear more specifics about what it is you can expect out of that support, what that will look like. There's another, for teachers who may be listening now, there's the Math Together community that's providing support for educators. So we have the support for educators and then the support for those of you at home. And we did have lots of families and colleagues and people that we know in our quote unquote real lives that said, hey, like, what are you doing for people at home? And so that's the whole reason why we created this. Our first thought was educators. How can we support and provide that community for educators, because we feel a real burden. But we wanted to also, during this really crazy school year that we have coming up, recognize that there's going to be a lot of learning happening at home as well, and how we connect the education support to the home learning as well.
Great. So be sure to check that out. That's a place where you can send people or go yourself. So in addition to that, we wanted to jump and piggyback off of what Kim was talking about and give you our top 10 tips for engaging caregivers. So we've created a resource link that in a moment I'm going to put into the comment box, and you can go there to get that resource. But we've got some three primary messages. And the first one is to be conveying an attitude and a spirit of collaboration. So we are all in this together. Like, we just can't say that word together enough. But this means that we know and we believe that everybody has the child's best interest at heart. And we know and we believe that there's real stress in this moment. And then we know and we believe that we are better when we do this together. So the first tip that we have is around mindset. And I think, unfortunately, there's been times in education where we're not feeling that we're on the same side of the fence. And I would say that the political climate at the moment also wants to put us on other sides of the fence, like educators and families, you know what I mean? But like, no, we are all on the same team, which is about educating children so that they experience joyful and powerful mathematics. And so that's the very first thing. And so again, we're listing those in that handout. I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the box. So that's the first line. And we're going to move on to our second thoughts around that.
So how we communicate. So when we consider best modes of communication, we want to keep things simple. So if you are in an elementary environment, we want to think about one email for the week coming home with sort of a snapshot or an overview of what to expect. I have 2 kids at home, and Molly has 3. So we experienced this ourselves, in that I would get last minute, and spring was one thing that we can learn from. In that environment, we were all in triage mode. We were all doing the best we could under an intense amount of pressure. As we're looking into the fall and then later on through the school year, we want to think of, okay, how can we do things differently? So sometimes I would get texts or emails with, oh, we're going to have a Zoom call in 15 minutes. And it would be from both my kids' teachers, and I don't have enough computers at home. And so if I had a snapshot of the week, then I could say, okay, I'm going to set aside these times for kids to have access to a computer or access to a device that they can interact with their teacher and or other students in the class. So that's a really important thing. And then that communication vertically within your building is going to be really important as well. So we're not asking families to all be on at the same time, particularly if you're not providing a technology resource for students. But even then, consider parents are working from home, kids are working from home. The bandwidth of a lot of families just to host that number of devices can be a real challenge. So we want to keep things very simple. If you're at the middle and high school, think about if you're working in teams, is it possible to have a single communication come from the team that has all of the information for the week on there, so that you're not getting 5 or 6 different emails that we're trying to communicate with parents where it's from each individual teacher? Because honestly, like, I'm an educator, and after probably end of April, I'm like ignoring half of the emails I'm getting because it was overload. And it's that idea of like teachers are trying to communicate with me, but I'm like, too much information. I need it in one bite where I can look at it and continue to refer to it later versus scrolling through a list of different emails that may have come. Additionally, if you have a classroom website or a school website that you could maybe post those things, that would be helpful as well, and make that information available to teachers, or excuse me, to families right at the beginning. Secondly, I'm going to say, make sure that you have a translator available for the different languages within your school community. You want to make sure that as educators, we're providing that to families, and considering you might need a closed captioning for your students if you're using Zoom or Google Meets. We want to make sure that we're providing all of those opportunities for parents and students to interact when we're not there face-to-face.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also put together a little resource that has some suggestions on setting up a workspace for students. I know that in the spring that everything seems very temporary, and I know my own 3 kids, there were various workspaces that were happening at different times, depending on whether or not they were in a Google Meet. They needed to have more privacy than if they were not in a Google Meet. We are suggesting that the better work will be done if students have a place to go where they have all the things that they need. We've made a list of what we believe is a pretty solid list of what students might need during a school day. Between a ruler, manipulatives, things that you have at home that would be manipulatives like pasta, obviously a computer, tape, various things that students might need. And to set that up, we even put a little picture in there so you can see what that might look like in your house. You might decide that having a whiteboard to keep the kids organized might be helpful. So that we believe is really important for consistency for kids to get their work done.
Great. So we've put all those things together and we've made sort of our top 10 bullets, so you can check that out. The link is now in the comments, and we look forward to hearing from all of you sort of what ideas have worked. Just like we heard from Kim, such effort made, especially over the summer, to make that connection, but really it's always there. So we look forward to hearing more and learning as we go, but we definitely need to work together as allies, and that just becomes part of school. And truthfully, I hope it's something that remains even when we're out of this pandemic. I hope we continue. I think that's only going to be an asset to our children's learning.
Mm.
So we want to discuss that Annalise Record is going to be joining us next week for our show. She will be joining us at 4 p.m. And so we're very excited to be speaking with her. She's going to be talking about one of her favorite manipulatives to use to help students make sense, and how we work really from an asset mindset when we're entering this new year with students versus thinking about all of the things that they may have missed in the spring. So that's going to be a really important conversation that we're having, and we're really excited that she will be joining us.
Okay. And thank you everyone for spending some time with us today. Take good care and remember to always be curious.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody.